Let me guess. So you drafted Victor Wembanyama. You had the number 2 pick. You were super hyped. You were like, yo, I'm about to win my fantasy basketball championship. I'm about to get this prize money. Before you know it, Victor Wembanyama goes down with the injury. You start losing game after game, week after week, so much that you start tanking. You stop setting your lineups and you don't give a shih tzu puppy about your roster. In this episode, what we're going to talk about is how you respond to losing week after week and how you can bounce back. So if you're losing week to week, the first thing you want to do is really appreciate the small wins. For example, let's say you have a player like Jokic on your team and he goes off for like 80 fantasy points or something like that, but you end up losing the week. Or let's say you have a rookie. For example, this season, let's say you draft Dylan Harper and Dylan Harper goes off for his season high 55 fantasy points for you and you lose the game by a little bit. That's still a win. I find not too much, but I find far too often that in fantasy, if we don't get the win for the week, if we don't win the championship, then it means nothing. When in fact, you're just making progress. So if you're losing multiple weeks in a row, try to identify the small wins. The next thing, I want you to treat every week like a fresh start. We are operating in a space where we have money involved in a lot of these situations where you've put in $50, $100 for your league pot and your prize money. So you're like passionate about getting a W. And I am too. And if you take a look at our community, you can see that we've crowned tons of champions. Last season alone, we have 47 champions. But you want to make sure that you don't get caught up in what the box score looks like just for that week. You got to look at it like having a reset every single week. The next thing is you want to engage with your league and the community, especially if you are a part of the Believe in Fantasy basketball community. If you're not a part of the Believe in Fantasy basketball community, all you have to do is visit believeinfantasy.com. And if you're new here, I'm Robin Marks. I used to work at NBC Roto World. I used to work for #basketball. I'm a member, I should say, of the Fantasy Sports Writers Association. And now I work for you. Engaging with your community will give you a second set of eyes on something that maybe you've developed some tunnel vision on. You've been looking at your roster, setting your lineups, not making a lot of moves, and just trying to see if you can come home with some victories, but you keep losing. If you reach out to the community, share a screenshot of your roster, they might be able to give you some suggestions on how you can improve your roster or potentially make some deals with some of your league mates to improve your roster. The next thing you want to do is analyze and adjust. So we talked about getting input from the community to make these changes, but this is also something you can do on your own. You can use tools like Basketball Monster, #basketball, or you can even create spreadsheets to kind of do some data analysis on your team, see if you believe it's the type of team that can get you to the next level. Also, the waiver wire is a priceless resource in the quest for a fantasy basketball championship. If you get into your waiver wire and create some watch lists for players that you believe might take off or they're in line to take on a bigger role if an injury-prone player is ahead of them on the depth chart, then that's how you get ahead of the game. So you want to make sure you're analyzing and you're auditing. And this one is kind of a no-brainer, but I got to share it. Remember, this is supposed to be fun, y'all. This is not something you're supposed to be stressing about. This is not something that you should be crying about. It's just a game at the end of the day. And that's one thing that we try to focus on at Believe in Fantasy. Yes, it is a data-driven space, but also we're humans at the end of the day. That's why I got you in the whip with me right now. You in the car with me and we just connecting. You riding with Robin Marks. Another thing that's worth noting is that we have far too many people ghosting in their leagues. People not setting their lineups. Now, let's say you have no chance of making the playoffs. Let's say you're like 0-8, 0-9, and you feel like there's no way that you can recover from that, right? First, I'll note that I've seen people come back from horrible records, right, and still make the playoffs. But let's say you believe you are out of contention for the playoffs. Remember this. There are huge playoff implications, right? Huge playoff implications that are connected to people who are ghosting in their league. So if you're that guy who's like, well, if I'm not going to win, I'm going to just lose on purpose, you can impact the rest of the league. So as a courtesy, if you sign up for a fantasy basketball league, win, lose, or draw, make sure you set your freaking lineups. It's the least you can do. It's the least you can do. But I know you don't want to end up in this position. So if you want to know how to dominate your fantasy basketball draft so you can win that championship, check out this video right here.